Chapter 17, I think. Yes. Church websites. Some of the biggest church fights are over the dumbest things, not real issues like the doctrine of salvation or the authority of the Bible, albeit these fights do and frankly should happen when someone starts reading Scientology books from the Presbyterian pulpit. While comical, that example is far-fetched and fictional, and the real fights aren't. People get offended and hurt, and they leave and find other congregations with all that spite and resentment and a talk show, with all the spite and resentment of a talk show intervention. Over what? The color of the church carpet? What the youth pastor keeps wearing? Maybe who's attending the church instead of who's not? Church fights are the worst. And the churches fight for the worst and stupidest reasons. But some church fights are not only necessary, but essential. Fights that need to happen for the sake of the gospel that aren't. People's just emotions and personalities clashing. Fights like who and how the website works. Trust me, I know who got offended at that last part. You're 50 to 75 years old, maybe a little older now. And worked on the tail end of the tech boom. You like computers and you don't know what Snapchat or Pinterest actually are. You run the soundboard or on weekends and fix every electrical problem the church has, like light switches and sound cables, because you're handy. You took out the volunteer position because you manage the church's website because no one else would, and you're doing as good a job as you can. Hear this with every iota and word from the next Bible verse. Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father, younger men as brothers. 1 Timothy 5:11. My grandfather worked for Honeywell, a company that made computer monitors and other electronics during the early 80s and 90s. He was a post-World War II radio operator for the Merchant Marines in the Netherlands and loved to tinker. I love that man. But were he still alive today at over 90 years old, no amount of want and passion on his part would let him run a church website the way that both the culture needs to see and the church needs to see compared to a young adult today. Take any saint who has journeyed with Christ over the last 3 decades, that person will not be in tune with as technology as their children, or even their children's children are. I have a 7-year-old daughter as I'm writing this, and she texts me on her mother's phone every time she steals it. She can't read or write quite yet, as evidenced by the string of consonants and auto-corrected words, but knows how to find my contact and sends me 41 consecutive... That's me trying to pronounce what she spells. Because she knows eventually I will send her a text with a picture of her daddy smiling because I love her. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there is a very natural progression of God's faithfulness and his walk with the ever-growing world of technology. God is not surprised by the market value of internet startups. Facebook did not catch him off guard. He saw internet porn coming a mile away, and Snapchat is right up his alley. He, unlike us, is perfectly prepared to do ministry online. My main question is when it comes to the church websites and church activity online is, are you? God may have picked fresh fishermen to build his church, but he also picked Pharisees, experts in the law. There may have been a good reason Paul was able to do more than any other apostle when writing for the New Testament. The right people need to be doing the right things in order to get the right results. Are you settling in an area that you shouldn't be so cavalier about? Facebook was scoffed at when it was launched as a big waste of time and is now a multi-billion-dollar company with more sway on the public than any other media network. Mark Zuckerberg is working to create the first real artificial intelligence and is planning on creating the first worldwide satellite internet network so you could be anywhere and connect to the web. All horrible misconducts of privacy aside, Mark is changing the world. Why? Because the right program with the right backing is doing the right things to find success. That's nothing to scoff about, but it's also not something to be casual hobbyist or an experienced in a related field volunteer did. Greatness matches ability and ambition. Be real with what you want to do with your church's website. Do you want it to be found by Google search? Do you want it to host your services and sermons? Are you trying to connect your church's congregations online? Because you can update your Google Maps address for free and say your name, and you don't need a website. You can post sermons to YouTube for free and still don't need a website. You can start a Facebook page for free, and nearly everyone you see a church can join it for free, and you still won't need a website. Many churches have websites so that you can land there first, only to get directed to other places on the web. What is the purpose of your website? Because if it can be done easily on a separate web service, it will. Nobody wants to compete with YouTube for video uploading and quality. Nobody wants Christian versions of Facebook because you can't play games on the church's clunky, glitchy, sad-looking social network. Use what's already here. It might be chock full of sinners and distractions, but hey, there's that verse from John again. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one, that they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. John 17:15-23. If the church wants to be relevant online, it can't just exist for itself. It also can't be run by inadequate experience or capability. It can't be a copy of what already exists, and it needs to be an accurate representation of a body of believers that's in the world it exists in. Not in pieces that look like other things, but in real life, a heartbeat of the congregation online as well. So take a long, hard look at your church and ask yourself, what do people want to see and need about our church? Maybe it's preaching. If so, it needs to be findable, both on and off the church's homepage. Most sites host YouTube videos that are no longer big, and there is no bigger search engine for online videos than YouTube right now. Yes, there are other options for online video, but ask yourselves, how often do you see them pop up in your search results? When you Google funny cat videos, how many Vimeo clips show up, or Dailymotion, or any other video streaming service? Because people on looking for your church need to be able to find it. First Google search. Or, if you want that sermon series to be recorded on the Gospel of Matthew to reach people who need to be found when its topics it covers a search for. Hosting content natively on your church's website, however secured, defeats the purpose of the internet being an interconnected network. The internet was made for sharing things. Keeping them to yourself is tantamount to not sharing them at all. Your website needs to be recognized that everything on the internet is searched for right now. Having a password-protected church website means you need a paper copy of the bulletin to get the password to gain access to it. Again, defeats the purpose of the internet. In both circumstances, you can have low-tech and high-tech problems to face. A low-quality, poorly constructed web page with a limited hosting will show its age and put people off who find it. It will look aged, unprofessional, and amateur, and will assert a lot of adjectives in front of the heartfelt work of what is most likely a dedicated but underqualified volunteer. It might check all the boxes of having the keywords so it shows up on Google, but if it's not what people are searching the internet are looking for, then you will not be what people pursue once they find it. On the flip side of that coin is a flashy, flash-based site with all the bells and whistles with no real content to turn people away to. One thing I can't stand to see on a website is stock photos and imagery that doesn't fit. I've seen East Coast churches with pictures of Banff National Park in the Rockies as the first thing you see. That's nuts. An Olympic ski jump in the majestic Rocky Mountains in the background is the furthest thing from a small rural church in New Brunswick. When you say something and mean something else, it's called lying in real life. Does your church website lie to people about what your church is about? Because if you have dozens of stock pictures of happy children with enthusiastic leaders and your children's ministry is 5 teens in a VeggieTales collection, you're lying. There's no reason to boast online about the quality of your church and its church services. No reason to brag about your ministries and your staff. Church happens with the same Holy Spirit that shows up to your worship services in grass huts and rural pavilions the world over. The church is not a building or a website. It's an earthly work of Christ and the praise and glory thereafter. So the following list will almost definitely be out of date at some point, but here are some observations of the websites to consider. Landing pages are the front doors of the internet. Like real life, a person needs to be able to find something they're looking for, so to exist online, the website for the church needs a catch-all landing page that ranks in Google when the name of the church is typed in and communicates with the nature of church in one shot. It should show up when your city's town name is typed in with the churches following as well. It should reflect your church, not stock photos of ambiguously trended pallet wood walls that are actually in your building's walls that aren't actually on your building's premises. A lot of misconceptions can be garnered by the good-looking but falsified front page of a church website. Any picture should be your church's specifically, not indiscriminate buildings or structures. Any people should be your people, not stock images of happy families or couples with Bible photoshopped into them. Deception and lying are the same thing, a line not worth flirting with. Staff directories. The next up is staff directories, which should be up to date by the week. While the unfortunate trend for pastors in the last year or two at any given church, regardless of people, is to see the face who need to be teaching them or their kids should they attend your church. Having an up-to-date pictures of staff, short bios, and contact information is key, something tragically overlooked as a non-Christian essential item. Pictures of your church inside and out. This one might seem trivial, but believe me, people want to know these things. One of the first things people do when they have an address on Google is check to see if it's a good street view of your building on Google Maps. They want to see if the big church that has all the great programs will have them walking 10 blocks in the snow come February. The internet is a place where people do research, both professionally and personally. And when you find a new hobby or interest, it's especially easy to be on the web looking up every facet and detail of that interest or hobby. Churches are no different. The raw information of what the building looks like is key, from a picture to where the fellowship happens to the sanctuary and seating. People want to know what they are getting into, and the internet can let them know. Videos of sermons. Shareable media for those who bite because it will lead to people attending your church. 1 in 5 relationships never used to happen online, and now they do, and they thrive afterwards. The same principle exists for churches. People won't give you the time of day on a Sunday if they see your church is worth coming to. If they don't see your church is worth coming to, they will geek out on your pastors online from the comfort of their home before committing. This allows people to catch up on the current teaching series before attending in person. If they are new or transitioning Christians, coming halfway through a preaching series can be tough, especially when the teaching builds off each sermon. Hosting online sermons can be a great way to keep the church in the same headspace and new members to find and choose to attend. Audio of sermons. Another options for Christians for the church would be the downloading of audio files that can be downloaded. These should not be your only option, but many simpler churches with websites have seen use this as an option. Online video gives a different look to the church, but audio leaves the size of the church. Online video gives a different look into the church. Audio only leaves the size of the church, the pulpit, and the pastor up to the imagination. It's simply not the best option if the video is also on the table. But notice I said sermons. There is a reason, because I restricted the recommendation to sermons, because amateur semi-pro live music recorded on generalist sound equipment gear sounds awkward as that description. One of the first complaints on any posted video is of the quality of the audio, and the potato quality of audio on most worship bands is prior to the sermon detracts from the message of the church as a whole. If the church is preaching the gospel from the pulpit and singing worship from the stage, then we draw attention to the flaws easily criticized when they are posted online, because both the stage and what's on it are put to the forefront. Because the internet is both a place and a collection of people posting anything but the acceptable media, criticisms, or neglect, like inviting a heckler to the front row of the pew to your church and putting a 5-year-old in charge of your live stream production sound. Small churches aren't going to be able to compete with large mega churches in terms of production quality, and maybe that's the point. When we pretend to be something we aren't, we lie. We're not only to ourselves, but to everyone we pretend to be something else too. It's tempting, like most forms of online activity, to want to manicure our images to get what gets posted online. By choosing to post only the audio of sermons because the lecture or voice only style of them translates into a higher quality than trying to record live music as well when a crowd sings. Church services are hard to produce at an enjoyable art form level because it's not an art form, it's a community of believers. But restricting the amount of content posted online to that which is best produced by the church is best served, and its messages is best proclaimed. Audio sermons are easily compared to live music, so by posting them separately, people can download and binge on the sermons as podcasts, which are fast becoming the dominant form of media consumed online. Their commutes and their spare time. It may not be the most popular type of online content, but it won't be the false hope and flailing involved in trying too hard either. There are a slew of other things that we talked about, from downloadable or syncable calendar of events to social media accounts, even chat boxes where people visiting the site could speak to the staff of the church in real time. What's not necessary is, and almost always ignored, is a Google map on the bottom of the page. If your church has an address in any key field of the website, it will show up on a Google search when they're already on your site and know how to find you. Instead, give them something Google can't, or at least not yet: a tour. Either a video tour or otherwise around your church in it, so people can see the Google Street View that they might meet Jesus at. The missing links. There's also something to be said about the nature of how the church gets its message to its community. How many people in the passenger seat of your car look at billboards when you drive? Or are they on their phone, on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter? How many people at home watch the 5th truck commercial in a row during a sports game as they feature dusty roads, heavy objects being loaded into the back, and a gravelly voiced simplistic description of how tough and powerful or pseudo-manly the truck is? Or are they on their phones, online, doing something else? Our attention is not where it used to be. So why are our methods of advertising and promotion? How many church-sponsored billboards for abortion litter the ditches of our highways, preaching pain and suffering, when the money spent on signs and paint derelict trailers could have been spent on food, diapers, and housing for moms who can't afford kids, and chose a one-time payment option for the problem? Locally directed Facebook ad could have found that teen mom in her online searching options and directed her not only to a body of believers that would help her, but to a place where she and her baby's lives are both valued. But the billboard will only tell her she's doing something evil. We need online invitations for a perpetually online hungry world, and that won't happen with commitment to the online mission of the church. We can't sit idly by in a board meeting and pretend like the majority of people in North America aren't on their phones for excessive amounts of time, then think that the gospel can't be preached there. It won't look like how church does now, but it will look like how church needs to be. Again, I get into that whole internet as a place thing. We're going to correct that because I don't believe it. But the rest of that I actually do think is important. A lot of church websites misrepresent what churches are because they want to look. They want to feel like something that they're not. And that whole like trying to be something else, constantly bringing what happens at Willow Creek or other big churches, like this is how the pros do it. And so we bring it to our church so that we can be pros too. That's deception, man. That is not who you are. You really need to focus on showing who you are. And, I would add to that what I added in the social media aspect or chapter that we just did, that testimonies. Your church's story about how the people that make up your church came to Christ, that needs to be in a church website. It needs to be a whole section. Like I said, I've only seen it once, and I think it's amazing. But that needs to be in there because it is what the church is. We are what Christ has done in us as the church. And that can get turned into content and put online to draw more people in so that they can also be changed by Christ, so that they can be a part of that cycle. And I think it's important. But yeah, church website is becoming kind of the front door, even though I don't think it is a place, to the church, because that's how we find things now. And so we need to start treating it like that. So I hope you liked the video. On to the next one.